Welcome to Grace for the Tryhard, a place where we tryhards can be reminded of the grace we've been given and be empowered to walk in it every day. Do you ever feel like no matter how hard you try, you aren't good enough? Have you struggled with shame and want to experience more freedom in your walk with Christ? Do you feel inspired and empowered when you hear other people's stories of transformation and healing? If your answer is yes to any of those questions, I'm right there with you. Being empowered to live and work out of grace is possible, and here we are learning how to do that together. No need to show up polished, poised, or perfect. Come as you are and join us as we experience God's grace together. Hello everyone. Hope you are having a great morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time of day you're listening to this. Welcome to episode 1 of Grace for the Tryhard podcast version. I honestly slightly can't believe it that it's happening. Through this process of starting this blog and now making a podcast to go with the blog, it's just really exposed a lot of my tryhardness that I forgot was there, as well as fear of failure, inner critic, all that fun stuff. So that's why I slightly can't believe it, because that has really tripped me up a lot, slowed me down, but it's also been awesome because I believe that things need to be exposed for them to be healed. And I believe God is using this project to expose what He wants to heal in me. So praise the Lord for that. So if you're starting a new project or want to start a new project and you're feeling anything I mentioned just now, you're not alone. I've had a lot of feelings preparing for this and working on this, and some of them have been excitement and joy and happiness, and that's been so awesome to just do something I love and share it with the world. But I've also just been nervous and have had fear, and you might be wondering why, because literally it's just a podcast. But it's because creating and sharing something with the world is very vulnerable. I'm definitely seeing that I am in the process of believing that my identity is not in what I produce. I talk about that a lot in episode 0. If you haven't listened to that, go listen to that right now. That's what this whole project is about, is walking and learning to believe that our identity is fixed in Christ when we put our faith in Him. So God is sanctifying me through this process, which means He is making me more whole. And that's been pretty awesome, but also it's not an easy process. So I just want to be clear ahead of time that I am not perfect. If you think that, it's not true. So have you ever watched a YouTube influencer or someone on Instagram or listened to a podcast and then you left feeling worse about yourself than before you listened to that? I have a few times, and I hate that feeling so much. And that's also been one reason why I've been, it's taken me a while to post this, is because I never want people to leave listening to this and feel that way. And I still don't really know why I would feel that with some podcasts over others, but I think a lot of that has to do with vulnerability. At least for me, I've noticed when people who have like a presence on social media or have a podcast and they are authentic, real, and even share weaknesses with the world, it helps me to see that they're human. It helps me to see that they haven't arrived and I don't have to just keep striving to get to where they're at. We're all on a journey. We're all growing together. So I just want you to know that ahead of time, that you don't have to put me on a pedestal. You don't have to put any of the people I'll be talking to on a pedestal. We are all saved by grace through faith, and all glory goes to God for what He does in our lives. So some things you can expect from me and from this podcast is that I don't see God perfectly accurately. I know that's shocking. I think a lot of people think Christian vloggers or whatever, that they've got it all figured out, that they see God for exactly who he is, and they have a super strong theology that can't be shaken. But the truth is, God is so much bigger than any human mind that no one is going to see him perfectly clearly. And I just want you guys to know that beforehand, so you don't come thinking, okay, I just have to learn from Lindsay and see everything she knows or everything she thinks about God and just believe that, because I have a lot of blind spots. And that's the whole point of this podcast, is bringing more people on who know Jesus and see him in a different way, who've experienced him in different ways. And as we bring our pieces of the puzzle together, we can see him more clearly. So yeah, I really just want you to leave listening to these episodes being more in awe of Christ. That's what I want more than anything. I don't want you to leave thinking Lindsay's so great or so-and-so's so great and I want to be more like them. I definitely feel that a lot, and I don't think that's completely a bad thing, but I never want you to be looking at me more than you're looking at God. So today, on our first official episode, we are going to be talking with a friend named Imani Kigamwa. So I was a little nervous because I'd never interviewed someone or recorded a podcast before doing this, but I learned that Imani was an awesome choice to be my first guest because she's so easygoing, so relaxed, so fun, and such an encouraging person. Imani shares her personal story of learning to believe that she can be herself and be accepted. We talk about middle school and high school, which are hard times for most of us, and the lies that Imani believed through those seasons, as well as how Christ-centered community and friendships helped her to see the lies that she was believing. And we end with just dreams Imani has for the future. So just a quick side note, Imani and I both worked as college campus missionaries with an organization called Chi Alpha, so we refer to a few event/phrases we use in the organization. So I'm just going to explain those real quick, just in case you're not familiar. She talks about core group, which is basically a group of college girls that Imani poured into, mentored, and helped them walk and be closer to God. Then we have Leaders Retreat, which is a retreat before each school year where all the students who lead core groups come together and prepare for the school year. She talks about Leaders Meeting, which is a monthly meeting with all the leaders in Chi Alpha, and then also the CMIT, which stands for Campus Missionary in Training, and it's a year-long internship with Chi Alpha that Imani went through this past year. So we laughed throughout this conversation because, well, that's just what Imani and I do. We love to laugh, so I hope you laugh along too. Whether you're doing the dishes, going for a walk, driving your car, or doing anything else while listening, enjoy our conversation with me and Imani. First things first, can you just share a little bit of your story?
Yes. So, let me think. There's so many different, sides of it, I guess, but I'm originally from Kenya, so I was born there, and then my family moved to the U.S. in 2008. 2007, and I was 8. That's what it was. And so when we moved to Bloomington, actually. And then, yeah. Lived here for a few years because my dad was doing his PhD.
At IU?
Yeah, at IU. So
nice.
We did that, and then we moved to Indy, and that was probably around 7th grade. So the move from Kenya to here wasn't actually that bad. But the move from Bloomington to Indianapolis was awful.
Really?
Yeah. I think transitioning at that age was just very difficult.
Because you were getting more into the teen years?
Yeah, that, 12, 13 age when a lot of things are the worst thing in the world. Everything you go through is just the worst. And so that move was really difficult, and I moved into a private like middle school. And so like not having been from a background like that, I think it was just a lot of culture shock in that way as well. Because the students at that school had known each other their whole lives and were from a like certain socioeconomic background that I also was not a part of.
Right.
So there's just a lot there that made it difficult that year. And I remember coming home from the first day and being like, oh gosh, Mom, like this is the worst. Like, how could this happen? Basically full drama meltdown first day.
Wow. What grade was that?
That was 7th grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just, I think, a long journey of like people pleasing and like anxiety around social situations starting there and going like well into high school.
Yeah.
And there's a lot there with like being one of few black students there, but also just with trying to figure out like what was my value and like how did I fit into that school and I don't know, what could I bring without all the resources that people had.
Yeah.
Like not having that. There's just a lot to process at a young age. And so that was like most of my young life, I guess. And then coming into college, I like just was able to find community, and you know, God was really good with that, with Chi Alpha specifically. But even through all of that, still dealing with a lot of anxiety, and now starting to go to therapy and like starting to unpack a lot of that stuff. It's very interesting to see like how I don't know, I've been building habits that were not like the best. Coping mechanisms that weren't great. Even when God has been moving in all of that, I can see how his hand was in like my experience as a middle schooler, like feeling left out, and then kind of building a heart for wanting to include people, I guess, or loving people well. And then, you know, I could see how he pushed me out of my comfort zone in a lot of ways, and like just how my personality grew out of all of that. But with all of that, still having a lot of other things to unpack and kind of talk through in therapy, I guess. So it's been a long journey, if you can even say that at 22.
Right, it feels so long, and there's still a long way to go. So, wow, thanks for sharing that and being vulnerable about just the internal struggles. I think a lot of people don't even realize what they were thinking as a teenager and how they were trying to fit in. You said a lot of really good things that I want to ask questions about.
It's like, I'm like, here's my whole story.
Where to go. So the first day of 7th grade was rough. And you still remember it.
Yes.
Like coming home and you decided, okay, if I'm going to survive here, I need to do something. What did you decide to do?
So I think there was like a lot of things, but it started with a typical 7th grade things where you're like, Mother, we need to go buy a whole new wardrobe.
Yes.
I need completely brand new clothes. No, but it was like around that, what's it called? Batwing shirt, pencil skirt stage of fashion. I don't know if you remember, but I came into school, I remember the exact outfit I was wearing.
Wow.
I came to school with tennis shoes that my mom had bought for me at Walmart, like the week before, a backpack that she had bought me at Walmart, and these like, you know, like dress pant material capris, but not like the good quality kind, the Walmart quality kind. So it was just like that instant feeling of I don't fit in, and pure some very obvious, like, I guess not like visual is the right word, like visual ways that I don't fit in, so we're gonna fix that first. And then like I think there was a lot of, in my interactions with people and how I would spend time with people, it just felt like I had to kind of be the way they were, and there was a lot of things that they were talking about that I didn't understand at the time. I don't know, like just different like social markers, I guess, or whatever. And so even having come from a sheltered sort of background, I was
Mm-hmm.
raised Christian and, like, raised in a God-loving household.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, with that was, like, different.
Yeah.
Coming into school, it's like, like, in the locker bay or whatever, and things are happening around you. It's just a culture shock in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there was that. And then it was, like, more academically rigorous,
Mm-hmm.
but that side of things I was prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
So with I kind of found the girls who were similar to me.
Yeah.
And hung out with them and kind of just stuck with them for most of my time at my high school. So it was a lot of those things, like changing how I was dressing outwardly and sometimes feeling like I was a different person at school than I was at home. Never really fully letting my guard down at school, I guess.
Yeah.
Was a big thing because it just felt like, well, these people are, like, very different from me, or I'm not going to fit in if I'm my full self, so I can't be.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was still going to church at the time. Like, I don't think there was ever a time that I wasn't going to church. I'm not sure why I said it that way. But, like, we were still involved in the church, and, like, I was still going to youth group and all those types of things, but it was very much like, I'm this way at home, and I am a different way at school, so that I can, like, survive. I don't know if quote unquote survive is the right word, but
right.
Yeah, it was a lot of that.
Yeah. So the girls that you, like, gravitated towards were the girls who cared about school and, like, worked hard and stuff.
Yeah.
So around them, did you feel like you could let your guard down at all, or you still kind of had to perform?
Even then, it still felt like I had to perform. I think with the friends that I did make, I still didn't feel very secure in those friendships, and there's a lot of insecurity in friendships basically from 7th grade until I got to IU. So, like, there was very rarely a time that I wasn't, like, putting on a show or, like, trying to be something that I wasn't. And I think maybe that's why I love my family so much, because that was the only place that I was actually, like, being real and fully real. And that's not to say that I wasn't, like, I wasn't partially myself at school. They're just things that, like, I didn't fully let myself, like, be or, like, enjoy. And so that's really interesting, I think. I'm remembering now, like, when it was people's birthdays, I was the girl who was like, oh my gosh. And I don't think I thought about it like they have to like me. I don't think that's why. I don't think I knew that's why I was doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
but like,
I
would be like, Mom, we have to go to the store so I can get them a gift or something. And it just felt like the end of the world. Like, this is my one opportunity to get them to like me or something.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there was a lot of that, I think. Just overdoing it for people, letting people walk over me. Even, like, the girls who I was close friends with, it was, like, not awesome, I guess. Yeah. And there was a lot of that feeling of, I had friends at school outside of that group who I was, like, okay friends with. Sometimes close enough friends with that you would think that you would get invited to stuff outside of school. And then when you didn't get invited to stuff outside of school, it's like hopes and dreams shattered, heartbroken. And it seems, like, trivial now, but at the time it felt, like, really terrible.
Yeah.
So there's, I think, a lot with that. Even now when unpacking that and trying to understand why, like, just thinking about things that you like and enjoy and passions that you have. Like, I love music, and I never let myself really enjoy music, like, for a while, because it felt like, okay, I have to be this type of person, or I have to do this, like, type of thing, and maybe I'm not going to be the best at it, so I'm not going to try. And I can see how that environment in 7th grade and trying to people please and trying to be everything for other people affected me in that way. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it does.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy because, like, what you're saying earlier about, it seems like it's not a huge deal.
Yeah.
But it was a big deal at the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's a big deal for anyone who's in that age group who's, like, experiencing these things. It's because you're, like, internally, like, figuring out how to get love. And how to be accepted. And we all want to be unconditionally accepted for who we are. But when the world is telling us, actually, you're not. Then that sticks with you. And that's how you think, okay, this is how I survive in the world. So that's really hard. And I empathize and I relate. And sometimes I even forget that's how I live my life too. Just funny getting to know you more and, like, seeing you lead your core group this year. I don't know, I just think God is redeeming a lot in you that I can see from the outside. So it's, like, not even everything that you're going through. It's just, like, you're such a welcomer and an includer, finding the outcast or someone who's quiet in the group and making sure that they know they're welcomed. Like, I think that's so beautiful, and it's just cool to be able to see that and hear more of your story. So I'm just interested. So you come to college, you have your high school experience. It's not fabulous. It's not great. And then you join Chi Alpha. What was that like for you?
Coming in, I don't know if this is just a freshman year thing, but you, like, make all these friends and everything is great. And I still felt, like, alone and lonely. It was like those feelings that I had been dealing with throughout high school were still there, even though they weren't true. Like, in high school, something that I would tell myself a lot, or, like, a thought pattern that I dealt with a lot was, like, nobody likes you, or you don't have friends, like, who are even your real friends, like, nobody wants to hang out with you, that type of thing. And so it was so pervasive for such a long time that I got into college and, like, meet these people who actually wanted to invest in me and, like, enjoyed spending time with me and, like, loved me really well. I could see it, but I, like, had not internalized it yet. And so there was a weird in-between period of time when it was honestly for the first 2 years, like, a good part into my sophomore year, I was still feeling this way, but, like, I would be with some of my, like, really close friends and just be, like, in conversation, be like, oh my gosh, like, nobody likes me, and they'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, why would you say that? You know, or even in passing, you say something like, oh my gosh, I have no friends, and they're like, well, okay.
Wait, I thought, oh, we're not?
Are we?
Oh, okay.
Exactly. No, literally. And it was just, like, this weird moment where I realized, like, I still thought that, even though it wasn't true. Or, like, I had to ask myself, why do I keep saying this if I know it's not true? And so it was really good coming into college and, like, finding that community. But I think what God did that was deeper was really showing me, like, that community is healing, but also that, like, there are some thought patterns that we, like, continue to engage with, like, long after that he's healed us from something, or, like, you know, removed us from a situation that's not that wasn't good, you know. And so I think there was a lot of that, and in some ways there still is, you know. It's like, as you grow you realize, but for me coming in, that was a big thing. So
do you remember, like, a moment where it started to feel like you weren't believing those thoughts so quickly, / like, was it gradual, or was it, like, I don't know, like, a breakthrough moment where you're like, oh, this is how it is?
It was, like, gradual, and then also all at once. So, yeah, it's, like, a weird way. A little bit of both. No, but when I came in my freshman year, I was in a core group that was, like, really vibrant, and we were very connected, really good friends. And then at the end of the year, all the girls who were in my core group, except for me, transferred.
Oh, dang it.
So it was like, all of my friends are gone. And I think for a moment there was that bit of, not panic, but I was scared that it was like high school again. Oh my gosh, like, I've been dropped, my friends have left me, I'm gonna be alone again.
Right.
And what was cool was God was so, like, almost instantaneously faithful, because I came into my first leaders retreat sophomore year and met, I don't know if you know Leanne and Hannah. Yeah. So I met them, and we were, like, instant friends, basically from leaders retreat.
Wow.
Really, really close. And so,
that's cool.
Like, having their friendship throughout that first semester, especially, where we would just, like, we were, like, real with each other and spent time together, and it didn't feel, like, transactional.
Yeah. That's good.
There was, like, a moment where they were probably the ones who were witness to my I have no friends moments.
Really? Yeah. Wow.
But, like, where we were all together, and I had this realization of, like, no, these are, like, my people. And maybe it extends past even just these two people.
Wow.
You know? Like, these are obviously, like, my really close friends right now, but knowing that there was a part of that relationship that was, like, over Chi Alpha, or, like, Chi Alpha wide, I guess. So, it was, like, released me to not have so much anxiety around friendships and what, like, people thought, and everything that was happening around me, and overanalyzing every interaction and everything that I did and every word that I said to the same extent that I did before. I would say that I still do that sometimes, but like, it's not as intense as it used to be. So yeah, it was very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm like, just thinking about that, overanalyzing everything you say all the time, it makes a lot of sense why there was anxiety. That's exhausting. Yeah. And I do that and have done it more in the past too, but it's just really cool that you've already seen healing in that area. Was there anything with those two friends, like a moment where you let yourself be yourself, I guess be vulnerable or show something in you that, like, could have been easily rejected and they chose not to?
Yeah. Okay, I can think of one really specific moment, and it's really funny.
Yes.
But I think, like, halfway through the first semester, maybe it was, like October or something of my sophomore year, we had all gone to get double piercings, like our second holes pierced. And this is, like, a side note, and it might take it a different direction. But, like, before, there's a lot with kind of just allowing myself to feel emotions and, like, be an emotional person, that it goes into many different realms of my life. So one thing that I struggled with before was, like, being not, like, forthright, but, like, I couldn't say if I had feelings for someone. Like, if I liked a boy, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I could never say it out loud. It's just always going to be in my head.
Right.
I will never reveal that to anyone. Feelings, humiliating.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just, like, dramatic in that way. And so there's this moment where I was with them. I think it was that day where we had gotten our ears pierced, or maybe we had leaders meeting, so we left and then came back together or something. I don't know. We were in the car, and Hannah was about to drop me and Leanne off. And I'm like, okay, guys, I have to tell you something. And so I, like, have this moment where I tell them, like, oh my gosh, I like this boy, you know, whatever. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, thanks for sharing. That was cool. And I'm like, oh, okay. Praise God. I don't know.
What was the expected response?
Right. I think I just always expected that, you know, I don't know why, because this had never happened to me before, but I expected that my friends would be like, ew, like, that person, or like, do you really think, like, you could date that, you know, just that type of thing, where you're scared of what people will say, like, what sort of judgment will come from this. And so there's something very freeing about that moment where they, like, handled it in such a, it was so casual, but they also acknowledged, like, how I was feeling, and they let me be dramatic in that moment.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, like, Imani had her moment. That's great. Like, let's go to Wendy's.
Yes! Oh,
but,
wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Especially I appreciate them not, like, because I think another direction they could go is, like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
And, like, start almost, like, trying to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's not even what you need in the moment.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to put, like, your hope into, okay, this relationship's going to happen or
right.
whatever, you know. So I don't know. I just think it's really cool that they're just like, oh, nice.
Right.
Okay, let's get Wendy's.
Right.
In a very genuine, like, way.
Yeah.
And they probably didn't even realize, like, what was going on on inside of you.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, I shared something vulnerable
right.
and they still accept me.
Right.
Like, this is cool.
Right. The world moves on. Like,
yeah. One thing, I guess, I think about the Christian life is, like, we're a child and we're free.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know what you were like before 7th grade, but it seemed like it was good.
Yeah.
And you're just Imani, and you're doing your thing.
Yeah.
You're loving music.
Yeah.
You're dancing, whatever. You have your family, and then you start hiding parts of yourself, you know, and manipulating yourself to try to fit in.
Yeah.
And now God is, like, peeling back those, I guess, the mask and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And you're becoming who you are again.
Yeah.
So, like, who does Imani want to be?
Yeah.
What do you want to do, I guess? What are some things that you think would be cool to do with your life? But also, like, who do you want to be, like, when you're 70 years old?
Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking about that, like, so deeply for so, like, it feels so long, but recently. I think when you're graduating and moving into a new season, that's kind of all you think about. Like, what's my life going to look like?
Yeah.
What do I want my life to look like and things? But I think, like, looking at, not specifically, like, really close family members, but just looking at, like, my family in general and, like, where they're at in their lives and maybe what they wish they would have done when they were young.
Yeah.
Put me in a place, like, in a position to be able to really think about my future and be like, what do I want and, like, what's going to be glorifying to God? Do those align?
Yeah.
Or am I, you know, do they not align?
Yeah.
Why, how, that type of thing.
Right.
So I think for me right now, what I've been thinking a lot about is how can, like, I love public health and that's what I studied and it kind of fell into my lap, but as I was studying it, I realized I really enjoy this aspect of, like, working with people and being a part of your community, I guess.
Yeah.
And so seeing how, like, what I know about health and public health can kind of, like, come together with, I don't know, what the church is doing or what, like, the kingdom in general is doing, I guess. So if that looks like missions, if that looks like traveling around places, like, you know, that would be very interesting, I think. But then there's also an aspect of me, a side of me, you know, there's the woman in STEM and then there's the artsy side of me. So,
yes.
I think the, like, more creative side of me has always been interested in, like, just not, like, telling people stories, but I find this very interesting, like what you're doing, like, just sitting with people and talking to them about, like, what God has done and what their lives have been.
Yeah.
And I enjoy poetry and I enjoy music, and so there's, like, do I think about and talk to people about their experiences and then write from that perspective. Like, those are things that are very interesting to me. I'm like, poetry book, maybe.
Yeah.
That was something that happened very recently that I thought about. I think it was during a prayer retreat or something where I was like, a poetry book.
Yeah.
But I think sharing some of those, like the creative, my more creative mind, I guess, with the world is something that I really find interesting. I don't necessarily think the way that I look at the world is unique, but I think that it's, like, a way that people don't necessarily allow themselves to think that often. Or maybe it's more whimsical or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do really enjoy the aspect of, like, music and poetry and art that, like, tells a story of somebody's experience or, like, gives you a new perspective on even like scripture, you know?
Yes.
People will write about, I think we talked about this, about David and like him in the pasture, and like how every time I read in the Psalms, I just think there's some Psalms that make me think of David living this idyllic life, like in the pasture, he's just with his sheep, you know, like,
right,
singing songs and doing things that, you know, young boys who are shepherds do.
Yeah.
And it can seem very mundane, but like I see the beauty and the like benefit of the life that he lived when he was young.
Definitely.
And we don't engage with that enough, I don't think. So
yeah.
I think like writing about that and I don't know, talking about it is very interesting.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I think what you're saying about David in the pasture, like, you're so right. Our culture doesn't think about that much.
Yeah.
Of like, kind of like with Jesus too, like not starting his ministry until he was 30.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, was those 30 years wasted?
Yeah.
It's like, actually, if he didn't like get really rooted in those years, I don't think he could have done what he did in 3 years.
Yeah.
And so it's the same with David too. Like, just that guy's crazy.
Yeah.
Like literally with Saul and like his submission to him, like I read it and I'm like, no, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. You know? And I think just being with God and alone with God so much as a kid, and he really knew God's heart, and it made him it allowed him to be free with God in his prayers. You know, you read the Psalms and you're like, oh wow,
right.
But that's intimacy. You know, that really challenges me, because I grew up thinking God wants the perfect, pretty Lindsay, you know, and like the perfect words and blah blah blah. So it's really helpful for me. So that's really cool, and I'm excited for whatever you make out of that. If you make a poetry book, I will buy it, read it, and and if you make music or whatever. And you said you feel like you don't have a unique perspective. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Why do you think that?
I don't know. Sometimes I think, well, this is just me personally, I wonder if I'm too much of a romantic with life, if that makes sense, you know? Like, not that everything will be perfect, but I really romanticize my life, I guess. And sometimes I think will believe that the perspective that I have, or like the way that I've thought about something, is just so like, this is a brand new idea. I think like it's me like trying to move more in the way of humility, to realize that like I think David's life has been inspiring to a lot of people, and this is just the way that it's inspiring to me, maybe unique to me, but it might not be like unique in like the grand scheme of the world, I guess. So I think that's why I would say that I don't necessarily have a super unique perspective, but like maybe have something new to offer to the Gen Z millennials of the world.
Definitely.
But
that makes sense. So it's more of like a balance of God made you unique and you are different than every other person on this planet, but there's also like I think about Ecclesiastes, where there's nothing new under the sun. So that's really interesting, just thinking about like we're always learning new things, and the way we learn it and the timing we learn it, I feel like is also different for each person. So that's why I think it's important to like share our perspective with the world, because we can glean a lot, but also knowing that like what we have to say isn't the best thing anyone ever heard.
This is the most perfect thing.
So good. What do you feel like is your role in the kingdom, like right now?
I do a lot to like bring people together. Like I'm a connector, and I enjoy community and enjoy spending time with people, and so there's like an aspect of me in like any church that I go to, or any like section or corner of the kingdom, if you want to call it, that I would be a part of, that would be like good at bringing people in and just like connecting people. I'm like I think it's cool to think about who I might be in the kingdom in like 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. But like right now it just feels so much like I will go and fill whatever position they need, you know, like serve where I can, I guess. I think like having different personalities is really cool in the kingdom. And I've seen that like really, really deeply during the CMIT. So like having people like Isaac and Katie who are like community to the max, but in the best way possible, because it's like I love connecting people, but I would never invite 15, 20 people to my house at once. Like, I don't know. It's rare. It would be rare. And there are some things in community that like need that. There's an aspect of like building a like missional community, let's say, that requires like a large gathering of people that is authentic and fun, and like people feel seen and enjoy being there type thing. Right. So that's really cool. And somebody like Sam prays so well, and it's like we need people like that. Like she enjoys to pray, she enjoys that time with God in a way that's really different from a lot of people. That's not to say I don't enjoy praying, but my prayers just like they're not felt the same way. And so I think just thinking about that and being like, okay, I'm a tender person maybe, or like I enjoy just to like, if we're in a large group of people, I like to be the person who hears what the quiet person is saying. Or having like a side conversation, or having small meaningful conversations with everyone in the room. That's like the type of social butterfly I am.
Right.
And so I think that can be like meaningful in a community, especially when there's people who aren't necessarily believers. Or you have a mix of people who are just on different like spots with their walk in Jesus. It can like, I don't know, make it easier. That it also makes me think about Andrew bringing Peter to Jesus. Like I feel like you're an Andrew in that like you're bringing people, and you're also I don't know, just helping people to see that I think we look at Jesus as like the guy on the mountain who's like preaching to 1,000. He was, but he also like cared about the one, you know, and you're like communicating that to people by being the person in the party who's like going to each, or the quieter people, or it's much needed in our world that feels so isolated. So the last question I have is, if you could say anything to your 16-year-old self, what would you say? Whoa. What does 16-year-old me need to hear? Maybe it's like cliche, but that like healing will come. Like it will be here eventually. There will be a day when like things don't feel so hard, or like that friendship doesn't feel as difficult as it did, I guess. And then to like just submit and let go of things as they come. I think for me, from 16, before 16, after 16, until recently, I was just like holding on to a lot, even just in the way of like self-condemnation. And so like I would tell a 16-year-old me to like submit those things to Jesus and actually let them go. Because like I think healing comes faster that way. You repent and then you let God do what he wants to do in your heart, I guess.
That was our conversation with Imani, and I hope you were encouraged and know that you were made for a purpose and are unconditionally loved by God. See ya soon.